Uh, Guten Abend, Damen und Herren. The start of my presentation is actually with this one image which I had once come across. And as they say that, a picture speaks a thousand words, and it indeed does, because this connotes a general tendency about how people perceive Islam as a religion, how people make violence synonymous to Islam. And in the wake of events like 9/11, which have been one of the most heinous acts of violence perpetrated in our generation, it becomes all the more important that we delve a little more deeper to try and understand what jihad really means and what is the concept of peace in Islam. And that is exactly how the next few slides will be broken down into. One part will focus on jihad, and the next part will focus on the concept of peace in Islam. If I may just begin with the jihad, then actually Father Francis summed it up in his three essays. The essence of what jihad is. Jihad is a fact of life. It is what we call in English as a struggle, as a strive. And that's the verse of the Quran which says that strive for the cause of God as it behoves you to strive for it. And jihad is a continuous action. Jihad is not something which is we get into for once and then it is over. It is something which prevails across a lifetime. And that is the reason why a mujahid is supposed to be somebody who does jihad, and that person is one who makes that struggle with his own self to follow the path of God. Now, what does this struggle look like? This struggle is something of the sort that, if I, for example, stand up for a matter of principle, for truth, then that is what jihad is. If I am able to overcome my own anger, my own vengeance, my own feeling of resentment against somebody, then I'm doing a jihad with my own self. And that is exactly what jihad stands for. This brings me also to a reference of the commandment of war in the Quran, because while jihad means essentially a peaceful struggle, and that's exactly how it is used in the Quran, but sometimes in the extended sense, it has also been used to refer to war. And before I get to the details here, I must mention that yes, we have heard that the Prophet of Islam during his lifetime was involved in a few battles, but it's also extremely important that we keep in mind the historical context of these battles and the historical context of that time. Islam came in the world at a time when the age was a tribal age. There were a lot of internecine warfare and violent means and methods used to settle practically all disputes. Now, in that kind of a scenario, it had become almost imperative, due to certain events that took place in the life of Prophet, that those battles had almost become unavoidable. But in the same vein, it must be understood that it was a very, very temporary phase. It was not something which was supposed to ever be a permanent phase. Even at that point in time, the freedom of religion was not a recognized right, and there were a lot of hostilities that were meted out on Prophet and their companions, because when at the advent of Islam in 610 AD in Mecca, Mecca was a place where polytheism was practiced, and Prophet of Islam came with the message of monotheism. Now, the Meccan polytheists saw monotheism as something which is going to impact their set of ideals, their set of customs, and their way of life. And that is why they grew all the more obstinate towards the message, and they began to inflict a lot of hostilities on the Prophet and his companions, to the extent that they even had to migrate from their hometown back to another town close by. But having said that, it is very, yes, there is a verse in the Quran which says that fight in the cause of God against those who wage war against you. but do not commit aggression. And I would just underline that, because there are very clear outlines in under which a battle can be waged. And first of all, like I said, that it is a completely temporary commandment. It is not something which is supposed to be of at all of any permanence. The second aspect is that a war can only be declared by an established state. So it is only and only an established state which will have to declare the war. Now, either no individual, no non-governmental player, and nobody can do a proxy or a guerrilla warfare. That's completely un-Islamic. The third criteria here also is, which is articulated in the verse of the Quran as well, that it is only it is only supposed to be an act of defense. It cannot be done in aggression. And which brings me to the fourth point, that it cannot be waged simply against an enemy. It has to be against an aggressor under completely hostile circumstances. Because there's a verse in the Quran which says that good and evil deeds are not alike. And if you repel evil with good, then one who is your enemy will become your dearest friend. And that is the sentiment that Quran carries. So the verse of, there is a very famous verse in the Quran which is that kill them wherever you find them. And a lot of people misuse and quote it out of context to say that Islam and Quran really teach violence. But that's not the case. That is that one verse which was used at the time of a battle ongoing. And it does not have a permanent role to play, like I said. In fact, this I would like to lead you here to another aspect, which is the greater jihad, which is what I was mentioning, that Father Francis earlier just summed it up when he talked about struggle, because that is really what the bigger jihad is. There is a tradition of the Prophet that once the Prophet and his companions were returning from one of the battles, and the Prophet said that we now return from a lesser jihad to a greater jihad, because the one in battle was a lesser form of jihad, and the one that you have to do with yourself was now the greater form of lasting jihad that they had to do on an ongoing basis. With this, I would also like to quote some more examples from the life of the Prophet of Islam to just convey what was his approach in general when he was, what was his approach when he was dealing with any kind of matters. And there is another hadith. Hadith refers to the sayings and the actions of the Prophet of Islam. Whenever the Prophet had an option between two courses, he always chose the easier or the non-confrontational option. And this is depicted in pretty much all the policies that, or all the examples that we see in his life. In Mecca, like I was mentioning in the beginning, when he started his mission in 610 AD, the house of monotheism, as it was built by Prophet Abraham, had become a house where over 300 idols, 360 idols actually, were housed. But even though he was a prophet preaching monotheism, Prophet of Islam did not start by waging a war against the polytheists or getting on to a mission of cleansing the Kaaba. That was not what he did. Instead, he took to a very peaceful propagation of the mission of Islam. Another example that we see is what is called as Hijrat, which is when the Meccan opponents had become extremely hostile to the Prophet and his companions, to the extent that they all planned, the various tribes in Mecca at that point in time planned to come together and unanimously execute a plan to kill the Prophet. And in those circumstances, the Prophet left his hometown. He had to eventually move out of there and migrate to the city of Medina. And that instance in the history of Islam is called as Hijrat. So he did not choose to stay there and confront with them. He rather chose to shift the place of his mission and of his action, and he made Medina now the center of his activities, rather than pushing to stay back in Mecca and confront the opponents. Another very famous incident is what is called as, well, it's called the Battle of Trench. There was thankfully no battle that was fought. It was an occasion when a lot of, again, the tribes which were opposed to the Prophet's preaching had gathered together to raise an onslaught on the Medinan Muslims, which was a very nascent population of Muslims that had just begun to grow. And it was a big military challenge, and Prophet did not want to wage a war. So he asked for ideas. And what he ended up doing eventually was that all the companions and the Prophet worked day and night. And the situation of Medina at that point in time was such that it was closed from 3 sides. And they dug a trench on the 4th side to ensure that a buffer got established between where the campaigners would rest and where Medina started, the peripheries of Medina began. And as they had thought, the campaigners came there, they rested for a while, they campaigned out for as long as they could, and because they could not pass over the buffer, they left. So there was no bloodshed that happened, there was no violence that happened. And last but not the least is the Hudaybiyah Peace Treaty, which is another milestone in terms of the efforts of peace that Prophet organized. And in this particular incident, the Prophet and his companions were going for a minor pilgrimage. And if I may remind you, Mecca used to be the center of pilgrimage for practically all religions back then. So there was no restriction posed to anybody coming from wherever at any point in time to do a pilgrimage. But when Prophet and his companions wanted to come and do the minor pilgrimage, the Quraysh and the opponents did not allow that. And they stopped them at a place called Hudaybiyah, and they said that we cannot let you go on from here. The Prophet again could have gone into a confrontation mode here, but he decided not to, and negotiations began. And those negotiations eventually led into this treaty, which was a landmark treaty called Hudaybiyah Peace Treaty, which ensured a 10-year no-war pact, and eventually it brought about peace in that region. But he left that year without performing the pilgrimage, unilaterally accepting all demands that the opponents had put forth. This also then leads us to the next part of my presentation, which is essentially about the importance of peace in Islam. Peace in Islam has the status of being the greatest good, or what is known as the summum bonum. The reason it is considered as summum bonum is that it is one of those ideals that the more you have, you will still not, it will never become disadvantageous. A lot of peace cannot become disadvantageous. Any other thing, a lot of it can become disadvantageous. That's the reason why peace really has the status of summum bonum in Islam. In fact, the very root word of Islam is silm, which connotes peace. And there is a hadith from the Prophet of Islam which says that a believer is one, a true believer is one from whose tongue and hands people are safe. The importance of peace is so much that God calls paradise as the home of peace. What this also means implicitly is that God has given this as a notion to everybody, that all the people who want to become eligible candidates for paradise should inculcate values of peace and culture of peace within them. They cannot adopt a culture of violence and expect to be eligible candidates for paradise. And this really brings me to the final bit of my presentation, where I'd like to end by saying that, in today's world we hear a term called Islamophobia very often, and the Muslim world holds that the West has come to regard Islam as a danger. But in reality, that is not the case. The case is that Muslims have gone ahead and perpetrated violence, and the actual phrase has become Muslimophobia. It is not Islamophobia, because Maulana says a very important thing, that Islam Muslims should be judged in the light of Islamic teachings and not vice versa. And I would just like to end by saying that there was an Imam in the history of Islam who said that the fate of the later generations will also get settled by practicing what the earlier generations practiced. And what he meant by that was that if we continue to follow the non-violent means which were practiced in the beginning of Islam, we will find our way in the later part of our generations as well. That will be it from my side. Thank you so much.